Good morning. Today is Wednesday. It is the 9th day of Kislev. Today is the birthday and the yahrzeit of the Mittel Rebbe, the son of the Baal Tanya, the Alter Rebbe. And he passed away at the age of 54. And this was, and tomorrow tonight is the day of his Chag HaGeula, the day of his celebrate his release from Russian prison. But he did not celebrate this because he passed away a day before his anniversary of release from prison. So it is very special, you know, that the birthday of tzaddikim is special, the yahrzeit of a tzaddik is special, especially when you have a yahrzeit and a birthday in the same time, the same day. It says this was exactly like it was by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu lived exactly to the day 120 years. So, and the Rebbe explains that about the Mittel Rebbe, this was also a similar thing, that Hashem filled his years from day to day. So we continue in the Tanya, in the Kuntres Acharon, the last part of the Tanya, and at the essay 4. And we spoke in this essay, the Alter Rebbe explains the concept of the special things about the mitzvahs, the actual mitzvahs, that doing the actual mitzvah is greater than having that the neshama senses the love and fear of Hashem. And the same thing is also when you study the Torah, particularly about the actual mitzvahs. Now today, Alter Rebbe is going to explain another point, and that is, we know when you do a mitzvah, when you do an actual mitzvah, a mitzvah of action, not only does it bring godliness in this world, but also it adds the revelation of godliness even in the higher spiritual worlds. What does it mean? When we have this high spiritual worlds, the Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, you know, all these that we discussed, the spiritual worlds. So when you do a physical mitzvah right here, you take a lulav and an esrog and you shake it. You put the tefillin, physical tefillin. What it does, it affects, creates more light also in the higher spiritual worlds. And this is something that we need to understand. How is it that a plain, simple mitzvah that you do here brings light to the place where it's godly? And this mitzvah that you do here brings even more godliness to that place. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is going to explain today. And we're going to look and we're going to see it inside. Here it says the Alter Rebbe. להבין. But we need to understand. Eicha esrog, shehu merapach shelo nivreru adayin. How is it that the esrog, the citrus fruit that you bless on Sukkot, which is from the 288 sparks that have not yet been purified? This we explained in the previous lessons, that in this world, there are 288 godly sparks that fell and was scattered in this world, and we need to purify them. And all of the physical objects, those who are not totally impure, they are part of the 288 sparks that need to be purified. So when we take an esrog, it's a fruit. Before it was done the mitzvah, it is just a fruit that comes from the 200 88 sparks that was not purified yet. And the same thing, v'chein klafat tefillin. When you take the parchment of the scroll of the tefillin, and it is the same thing, it comes from the sparks, the 288 sparks that was not purified yet. So how is it that this yamshich oil bekelim dezun de atzilus? How can this elicit light into the vessels of zun of atzilus, zo and nukva of atzilus, which is the levels, the atzilus, as we said, is the highest spiritual world, a world of godliness. Shekvar nivru v'nistaknu al yedei sheima liyaz b'chines elokus. Now these worlds, atzilus, have already been purified and rectified through the purification of the name Ma. We explained before, the name Ma is one of the combination of the name of God, 45. And this represents the level of Hashem, the way it came down already and was rectified, so that they are in a state of godliness. And yet we say that when we take the mitzvah, we take a physical, actual mitzvah, and we perform the mitzvah, we add light into the level of Atzilus, into the highest level. To understand this, the Alter Rebbe is going to use a very simple example that we have in this world. And that is the idea of when you plant a seed into the ground. What happens? How does things grow from the ground? You take, let's say, a seed from an apple, and you plant into the ground, and all of a sudden there's a tree growing. How is the tree growing? What makes the tree to grow? And if you plant the seed of an apple, it grows an apple tree. Why not an orange tree? So what happens is the seed has in it the ability, when the seed rots and goes into the ground. In the ground, there is what it's called the koach hatzameach. It is the power of growth that comes from Hashem. When Hashem said in the creation of the world, Hashem says, "Tache ha'aretz deshe," let the earth grow, make her grow. So there is a godly potential to grow, and the potential is to grow any kind of tree. Now, when this seed goes into the ground and it rots, and it becomes nullified, becomes one with the soil, the seed triggers that immense, that potential power that is in the soil. The tree is, the seed is called the mayim nukvim, the feminine waters that triggers and brings out the power, the potential that is there. So the same thing is, says the Alter Rebbe, is with the mitzvah. When you do the mitzvah with a physical object, in the roots of the physical object is very, very high, but it's concealed. You don't see it. It's just like the seed. You don't see the potential in the seed. But when you do this mitzvah exactly the way Hashem said, this triggers and brings and calls out, just like the seed calls out the power of growth from the soil, the mitzvah for the physical object calls out from the very root of the godliness, and therefore it adds even more godliness in the higher worlds. Because the higher world, as high as it is not the very essence of Hashem. And the mitzvah that we do in this world enables to bring out the root and the potential of it. So let's continue inside. Says the Alter Rebbe, Hinei hamashul hazeh hi azriya ve'anetiya. So the analogy for this is the process of sowing and planting. שהגרעין מעורר כוח הצומח שבארץ. So the seed stimulates the power of growth within the soil. שהוא דבר השם, תצ'י הארץ חולו עץ פרי, which is the God's command, let the earth sprout forth fruit, trees, and so on. So this is the words, this words of Hashem is concealed within the soil. And what stimulates this word of Hashem, this command, this is the planting of the seed. And this is how it's done, through the elevation of Maim Nukvim to its source. The Maim Nukvim, the feminine waters, is being elevated, and the same thing is also with the mitzvah. Says the Alter Rebbe Kocho, me'oirerim ha'klaf ve'esroig ad ruma mailos. And so too is the klaf and the esrog, the parchment of the tefillin, the esrog that you bench. Also, this is arouses adruma mailos unto the loftiest level. Shehu, the loftiest level, shehu shem sag shelifnei ashvira. Where does it reach, and to what level does it reach? It reached to the name Sag. As I mentioned before, Sag is 63. This is one of the combination of Yud K, Vav K, the name of God, and this, which is a higher level. It is called from the world of Tohu Shalifnei Ashvira, which was preceded the shattering of the vessels. It is a very intense light. That's the source of the physical objects. Shehu me'us ve'atzmus oiros shebe'odem kadmon. And this is, which is the very essence of the light of Odem Kadmon. Odem Kadmon is considered the level with 4 higher than Atzilus. And this is not just a reflection. Veloi ha'ora ba'alma kemoi shem mashim mitzchay. It is not merely a reflection, as it is the name Ma, the name 45, the Shem mitzchay, which comes from the forehead. Forehead is just a reflection. But the name Sag, the light, the tense energy that comes from the higher level is hidden in the physical objects. And when you do this mitzvah with the physical objects, therefore, it brings out this, it triggers this immense light, which is even higher than the light that there is in the world of Atzilus. Now the Alter Rebbe continues, not only when you do the actual mitzvah, you trigger this immense light, also when you study the Torah, particularly when you study the Torah, which talks about the actual mitzvahs and the laws of the mitzvahs, there too, you also trigger a similar light. That's what Alter Rebbe continues. Similarly, the study and carefully examination of their laws, that the laws that regulating these mitzvahs, says this arouses the chachma binadas, the intellect, understanding, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge of the 10 spheres of the vessels of Zun, Za, and Nukva, and so upward to the greatest heights. So also it arouses, including the Chachma Bina Das of Sag, which is the highest level of light, the Pnimius Adam Kadmon, which is the inner dimension of Adam Kadmon, Ayoytze Derech Ha'einayim. This issuing through the eyes of Adam Kadmon. So they use this metaphor. There is things that is reflected through the forehead, and there's things that is reflected through the eyes. When through the eyes there's something much deeper comes out. The forehead is only a reflection. You cannot see. The eyes is like the window to the soul, they say, yeah? Things you see from the eyes. So he's saying that when you're studying the Torah, the wisdom and understanding of the actual halachos, it comes out, it is bringing out the deeper level of Adam Kadmon, the higher man. And this is done through the studying of the actual halachas. Now, all of the above, what we just said, hu b'mitzvahs asay. It is when you do an actual mitzvah, mitzvahs asay, a positive mitzvah, and when you study about a positive mitzvah. But what happens when you study a negative mitzvah? What happens when you talk about things you're not allowed to do? Does the same thing happen? In generally speaking, it says that anyone has a chance to do a sin, and he doesn't, then he gets reward just like he did a mitzvah. Any mitzvah. You have an opportunity to eat something which is forbidden to eat, and you don't, then it's considered like you're actually doing the mitzvah. So the same thing is when you study something about this mitzvah that you could have done, and you stop and you don't do it, the studying it also triggers the same light. However, says the Alter Rebbe, but sometimes there's such mitzvahs that is almost never, it never happens. For example, he says the mitzvah of pigul. What is pigul? Pigul means that when the Kohen, when he brings the offering in the temple, he is supposed to think in his mind that the korban, this offering, will be eaten in the right time that the Torah gives to eat. A day and a half, whatever it is. But if you have in mind to eat it a day later, that is called pigul. That means the korban, the offering, is not qualified. That is a violation of the Torah. But let me tell you, when was last time you had this chance to do it? Nobody does it. We don't have a Beis Hamikdash right now. And even if we have a Beis Hamikdash, not only Kohanim have this. And even the Kohanim, which Kohen comes and thinks about this mitzvah? So there's some mitzvahs that are far-fetched. Nobody ever thinks about those mitzvahs, about those violations. Still, says the Alter Rebbe, and that's he's going to explain tomorrow more in detail. And that's what the Alter Rebbe says here. Mitzvahs say this concerning positive commandments, but not, it would seem, the study of the practical, of the particulars of the prohibitions, particularly those that are not that do not occur in practice at all. Kemoi, for example, the details of the laws of pigul that we just explained, and the like. So where do we have this connection with Hashem and this light that we bring in those mitzvahs that actually never happen, almost never happen? This, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain tomorrow. To conclude that this is, the Alter Rebbe brought an amazing thing about another point of doing the mitzvah, that just like the seed, when you plant it in the ground and the seed is completely, it becomes, it rots and decomposes, and then this triggers and brings out the potential, the power that they have in the soil to grow. So the same thing is the actual physical mitzvahs. When you do the mitzvah, the actual mitzvah, it arouses and brings out the energy, the godly energy that is in this mitzvah, in this physical object. And not only does it bring down godliness in this world, but even in the higher spiritual worlds. So this is the end of today's shir. Thank you so much for joining. Mitzvah Hashem will continue tomorrow. And